Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast, where we're joined by your hosts, Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips to help you turn your NDIS business into a profitable venture. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, you've come to the right place. Let's stop surviving and start thriving.
Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast. I'm Tania and I'm here with my host, Paul. How are you going today, Paul?
Really good, thank you, Tania. It's great to be here. I'm getting the love. I'm enjoying being back doing these episodes. We're getting great feedback, and today we are going to dive into the changes in the NDIS and the need to be able to adapt and pivot your business to keep on top of the changes, because it seems that every other week something else is changing a little bit. So let's dive into that today.
Yeah, so there's just so many changes happening. There's so much fear mongering. I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't even want to open my LinkedIn because it's such doom and gloom out there. It's like, we might be losing support coordinators. We might be losing plan managers. Nobody's being paid. Everyone needs to be registered. We're removing categories of SDA, which means that there's a whole lot of SDA people out there panicking about their investments. And there's just so much uncertainty. I guess I wanted to try and flip it a little bit and talk to you specifically about how do we use this uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a threat? And I know you work with amazing people around coaching and mindset and looking for opportunities and growing their businesses. So I guess that's where I'd like to start today, Paul, is what is your advice? How do we use this as a flip it to be a positive rather than a negative and look at different ways for using this opportunity?
Yeah, look, it's one of those great things that anything that is a threat can become an opportunity. And it's that old judo move where you take someone that's coming at you and you can flip them with their own momentum. There are things that you can do in your business to be able to take obstacles and turn them into things that can actually take you to the next level. And we've seen this continuously with people that build businesses and are successful. They don't allow obstacles to take them down. Something that I've been really seeing happening is that it's going to be harder to be a provider with the changes. There's going to be, whether it's more regulation, all that sort of thing. But the great thing that happens when something is hard is less people do it. And so if less people are doing it, it gives you an opportunity to stand out in the crowd. And, we spoke a little while ago about, registration and, the changes that are happening there. And, the harder things get, the less people do them. And so, looking at that old idea of your SWOT analysis, which hopefully some of our providers have had a chance to go through, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats. How can we take those threats and turn them into opportunities? I've got a number of providers I'm working with who, in fact, through your help, have put in tenders to the home care package supports. I'm 95% sure I got those letters in the wrong order, but the the aged care. Yeah, that's it. That's the one, right? And because they're providing similar supports, and so being able to utilize what you do here and repackage it over here to help people. There's all different types of opportunities. For instance, providers operating within the private insurance schemes and the Veterans Affairs, and even in the private sector with people privately funded for support. There are more options than just operating in the one field. It's taking those threats that might seem like it's becoming difficult and going, right, well, we have opportunity to pivot and take this service over here. One of the things we've obviously seen is support coordination and plan management, but just on, seeing support coordinators moving into different types of services with the changes that appear to be coming, which obviously makes sense. I'm wondering what, for instance, from your perspective, a support coordinator and other people in that sort of space feeling the pinch can do to reduce some of the risk around the unknown for themselves, Tanya.
Yeah, I think it really is diversification. And so I have quite a lot of support coordination clients that also do things like provide therapy. So they might, um, obviously not to the same participants because of the conflict of interest, but they're kind of pivoting to being able to organize therapy appointments, especially if they were already psychosocial recovery coaches, then, organizing counseling, moving into other areas of the NDIS. And then if you move into something like allied health and higher allied health practitioners, you can then also diversify into Medicare. And you then also mentioned a few other things there, such as they used to be called ACEA. The Attendant Care Industry Association had their own funding around rehabilitation and other supports around that as well. So I think there's lots of opportunities to deliver your service in other areas. And I know this might seem opposite to our advice around niching, but it is actually still doing what you do best, just to similar cohorts.
Yes.
So aged care, I think, makes a lot of sense. The home care system is changing for the better, I believe. We hope. So there's a lot of opportunities to move into the home care space. CHSP is a Commonwealth Home Supports Program, which is a much easier entry point than a whole home care application. So that grant came out recently, and it will come out again, I think, in about, it runs from October this year for 9 months. So then it'll tender again, we believe. That's the understanding. So there's that. I think one of the other areas for support coordinators is that a lot of support coordinators are really good social worker, by background social workers or registered nurses, and are really good at case management. And so there's actually quite a lot of opportunities in every state. Specifically, they all do it a bit differently, but in out of home care, which is really supporting children in the out of home care system, and a lot of that is heavily case management. So it's really looking at your skill set and then looking at how you apply it. I've had plan managers who are financial or business people by background, then use that experience to do other things in the NGIS space. We know our friend Chris from Care BPO. He started as a plan manager, and now he runs a BPO that supports NGIS providers. I have another client who was a plan manager who has rolled out a tech software solution and consultancy firm for NGIS providers. So I think I've always, because it's a brand new sector, like we're 10 years old now, NGIS, which is really so infantry if you look at the space and look brand new. In NDIS, it's never been what's the opportunity. It's what opportunity aligns with your skill set and what can you do the best in the world. And that's really how I found my space in the NDIS world, is that, quality and compliance is quite challenging. And yes, that's a challenge for some, and it's an opportunity for me. And, Paul, you probably are similar, business coaching and coaching people through the process. If the NDIS was really simple, maybe they wouldn't need business coaches to help them through, or consultants to help them through. So we've used it as an opportunity. And there are just so many opportunities in the space, whether it be, tech opportunities, training opportunities, diversifying in other schemes, helping people with the skills you've learned as a support coordinator, whether that helping families navigate the system. I think it really comes back to that concept of ikigai, which is, what the world wants to pay for, what you love the most in the world, and what people need. And if you can find your group, your part in that, then a job will be there. You just will have to create it and find it, as opposed to be given a role and a title. You'll have to make those things up, maybe.
Yeah. I absolutely love finding that cross section of what people need, what you can provide, and what can be paid for. Is a great way for any business owner to be able to go, is my service valuable? Is my service then valuable over here also? And then where does what this we do here transfer into different areas? One of the exercises I like to take a provider through, for instance, is to get them out of just the NDIS jargon and the everyday, and I guess like the blinkers on having to operate in a certain way is we get them to imagine they're actually a different business altogether, because business is business, and sometimes you do need to pivot and change things. But having a really clear idea of, right, well, if I was doing this, like for instance, one of the things that we do immediately is, if there was no such thing as social media, how would you promote your business? Right?
Yeah.
There are a lot more ways than just posting your business logo in Facebook groups and hoping someone likes it more than the next logo. But just the idea of understanding, this is why we operate how we do, because I've got this passion, I've got this skill set, my team have got this skill set. And so how should we get that out to the market? How, if education was your only platform to get in front of people, how would you educate people? If the only way to get out in front of people was to go to cafes and talk to strangers and help them with a problem while they're sitting there then that's what you would have to do, right?
Yep.
So looking at diversifying the way that you do what you do and where you do it and how you get it in front of people is a great way to be able to look at it and go, right, well, this service looks kind of like that service. What would we have to do in order to be able to provide that, or adapt what we do to be able to provide a service in that sort of space as well?
So maybe the hypothetical question we should be posing to our audience then is, if your service in the NDIS wasn't funded tomorrow, what else could you do?
Yes.
And maybe it is, or if there's no NDIS tomorrow, if the government pulled up stumps and decided they were removing the NDIS altogether, yes, we would all, there would be an outrage. But let's just say that that's what's happened. The government's decided. What would your business do next? How would you pivot? What would that look like? And if you can problem solve from that point and find yourself a new niche, a new purpose, a new passion from that space that uses your skills, supports your participants without government funding, then maybe that's what we need to be looking at. And a perfect example of this is the NDIS royalty of Yasuzaki, in that during COVID, he, the story that he I don't know if he told us, or if he told us on the podcast, or if it was in another interview that I had with him, but he told me this amazing story that during COVID, his disability businesses, were so uncertain that he actually went out and found a new business, and he decided that it wasn't going to be dependent on NDIS funding at all, that he was going to build his business around a commercial model. And what he did was set up the Frap and Cat coffee shops, which are hire people with disability, because his mission in life is to make the world more inclusive for people with disability. So it still fits the mission, still within the disability world. They're for-profit businesses that happen to have staff who have disabilities. They're not government funded. And he imports the beans, he roasts the beans with people with disability doing all of this work. He pays them normal salaries, equal salaries to everybody else. And he is now franchising this Cap and Frap coffee shops all around the world, which will generate revenue, but is completely within his mission as a disability service provider. It still meets the whole idea of lifting employment, and maybe it even does a better job because you don't have the government, hurdles and the red tape that you do. If he wanted to set up as a disability employment service provider, he has the funds to do this. He could do this, but instead of him doing that, he worked outside of all government and said, no, I'm going to actually create a for-profit, a business that's for purpose, that is going to do amazing things and not rely on government. So if the NDIS goes tomorrow, we have a backup over here that's meets our mission and supports our goals.
So good. Look, I think that anybody who is currently listening to that story who goes, oh, yeah, I once had an idea that I could do something like that, but it all seemed a bit too hard or a little bit out of my zone, or maybe I should just keep my lane, or I told someone and they said that'll never work. Maybe you should be revisiting it and go, well, my passion was to open up a mechanical workshop where we could employ people with disabilities and train them to work, whatever the thing was, right? It's still in line with what you want to do. It's a passion that you have. Some of the most incredible businesses in the world were started out of necessity and passion meeting head on and creating something amazing. So, yes, no, that definitely wasn't on the podcast. That was somewhere else. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tania. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it is. And look, there's so many examples of that. I don't know if you've seen the amazing work that the guys at Payless do. I met them at our Christmas event in Melbourne, and look, I just think they're amazing. And they have a model. Their support work, they are social workers by background. They talk about themselves as being undercover social workers. And they have said that if the NDIS went away tomorrow, they would just support the out-of-home care system, which is always going to be there, sadly, and they would be able to pivot into that market. And they do still work in that market. That's where they started their business, and they utilize NDIS for the participants who have that funding, but there's certainly their business model isn't built around 100% of the NDIS funding. And that's really, as anyone relying on government funding, you need to have other sources. When I was running RTOs, we had state-based funding, we had federal funding, and we had funding. We had a license to support international students, which was a completely separate thing. And then we also had fee-for-service. And at any one time, we received hundreds of millions of dollars of funding for one federal funded bucket. And I can't lie and say that we completely diversified and every stream was given the same importance. The one bringing the money was definitely given the importance, but we had multiple other streams. And we set up as an international college right at the peak of having all of this money. And everyone was like, you're spending all of this time and effort registering as a CRICOS provider over here, where you could have been spending money receiving government funds and utilizing that stream. And I was like, yeah, but if that stream stops tomorrow, I won't have any backup. And that's actually exactly what happened. We received our CRICOS registration, and it wasn't even 2 months later that vet fee help was completely stopped, and the money that was coming in wasn't. We had state-based funding that we could also diversify. We also had trainees, but it was really clear to me that when that stopped, you had to pivot so quickly. And from that point onwards, in every business that I have, I always have the opportunity to pivot and have multiple things on the go at any one time. And it's really because I've learned that if we only rely on anyone, whether it be government, whether it be one client, whether it be any one person that isn't yourself, that the risk to the business is just too high. And in my first business in Jelly Beans, we had we gave free childcare to people with cancer, and we were 100% reliant on the Cancer Council to fund us. And inevitably, the day came that they said, we can't continue just to give you money here. We need to move to another model. And it was 350 parents that I had to find something else and how to do it. And I was 26 years old at the time. And I actually took out a second mortgage on my home, and I payrolled it myself for as long as I could. And then I went and did a PR campaign and got sponsors and got it going, kept it going for a year longer. We pivoted to be a volunteer organization rather than paid staff, just to keep it alive. But it just simply wasn't sustainable, and we were still just reliant on people giving us money. And then I found this tiny little bucket of funding called in-home care funding, and moved my clients over to an organization that had that funding. And that meant that the business, that the charity that I ran had to stop. But it then supplied certainty for those clients. And, I didn't know at 26 years old this was called diversifying, but if I could have gone back in time, I would have applied for many more grants. I would have, I would have really done a really different process to really make sure that could be the business continuity could continue.
Yeah.
And so I think in NDIS, that really is something that if we're talking about pivoting, we have to talk about why are we doing this? Is this a legacy that we're building? Are we trying to build something that supersedes us? Or is it just to earn an income? And neither are right or wrong. You don't have to build a legacy. You can just support your family. That's perfectly fine to do. But if you're trying to create a legacy, then it has to continue after you're gone. So you need to have a business robust enough for you. And I don't mean when you die necessarily, just when you want to move on to the next thing. You might want to put a manager in place or whatever. And all of that requires a really strong foundation in your business. And to do that, you need multiple income streams. And so within the NDIS, your multiple income streams could be community access and SIL homes. That's diversifying. But then you might also want to diversify and have a look at how do we set up an artist studio so that when our participants are doing community participation, they can publish is it publish? I don't know. Can display their art, and then maybe it can be sold, and then maybe we can run art classes for participants funded, but maybe there's also a market for those paint and drink workshops that I see everywhere, or those hens nights, or workshops for schools, so that you can diversify outside of government funding as well.
Yeah, look, there are so many options if we get a little bit creative with what we're doing and the results we're getting people, and we don't just limit ourselves as providers to, limit yourself as a provider to just those that stock standard thing, and look at, right, as you said, if the funding were to dry up tomorrow, how would we continue what we're doing? It reminds me of Chevy, an awesome young dude running this ability crew in Brisbane. He's actually taking young people and helping them to develop skills in their space of woodworking, and like they're building furniture that they can then sell. And so they've got a Gumtree page where people have been able to start making things themselves and selling things, and now that's receiving like sponsorship for him to be able to have materials to be able to put on display for these people to be able to build up gaming stations and planter boxes and all this sort of stuff. But that is now starting to fund the growth of that as well, because he's giving people skills, he's assisting them with things, plus he's doing something he absolutely loves, which is a joy to watch his videos as well. But he's moving into a space where it's not as reliant, and all those things take a time, but you don't have to be always just reliant on NDIS funding. How else can you be creative to be able to still help people if the NDIS, and this is not a doom and gloom thing, guys. The NDIS is not going away tomorrow. We got at least a week. Sorry, I'm being facetious. There is plenty there, but things change. And so, with all the uncertainty that is there, how do we mitigate as much of that risk as possible through your creativity, through the opportunities you have in front of you that maybe you're just a little bit scared to jump into, or maybe that's a bit of a risk? See about mitigating that risk as much as possible and finding those things, just like, as you said at the beginning, Yasser, looking into how can we fund support if there was no government-funded support to operate with. And, it's such a good news story, and it's become obviously so much larger than maybe what he even intended at the beginning. I don't know. I'd love to find out. But it's a brilliant idea. If you can think about just that idea of, if this all stopped tomorrow, how could I still help these people? How could I still live? And what changes could I make over the next 12 months to make sure those things happen?
And there's lots of examples of this outside NDIS. And I think sometimes maybe in NDIS land, we forget that there's businesses in other spaces that navigate the same things. And so, there's really good examples of this I look at, the education space, but also childcare centres, financial services. There's lots of regulated spaces that have small and medium businesses in it. And lots of them have this same problem of government changing the scheme, changing the funding, controlling the prices. And they deal with it by diversifying and looking for other opportunities. And so maybe just have a look around your local area at people who run, diverse businesses that maybe don't make sense at first glance, but the skill set of the owner or the entrepreneur is transferable. And so for me, I have an e-learning business, which is so completely different than NDIS auditing. And lots of people are confused how I could possibly run both businesses. But my skill set as a teacher means that I love education and I also love technology. So developing education online beautifully to look great using technology is something I love. And then auditing actually uses also my teaching skills, because actually what I do is teach people and build their capacity, which is also teaching. Sometimes I do that in online programs. So it all in my head makes sense. And it might not be, there's not a child sitting in high school that says, when I grow up, I want to be an auditor and I want to earn a learning business, right? They don't seem to be mutually exclusive and go together. But for me, in my skill set, that makes sense. And I think it's also just about looking at what are you great at and how can you use those skills in a way. There's also so many examples of for-profit businesses that have been set up to support not-for-profit businesses. And so just having a rethink and doing that blue sky thinking around, okay, well, the NGS is having challenges. It is uncertain, but let's create our own certainty, and let's actually put some things in place that are going to take me ahead, regardless of what the NGIS is doing. And that might be home care, CHSP. It might be therapy. It might be completely outside of NGIS. Maybe you've decided that in NGIS, the bit that you loved the most was, supporting children. Maybe actually what you could do next is a childcare centre or an after school care centre. Or maybe it is a school holiday program that isn't exclusively for people with disability. There's lots of other ways to work with your skill sets in other ways if you just think about what you love about what you do, where are the needs and demands. And also, something else that YASA taught me is this idea of just creating your own demand, not waiting for people to tell you, but actually innovate, create something new, create something that hasn't been done before, and do it and figure out a way to make that happen. And if you can do that in these tumultuous circumstances, I think there's some quote around it. I'm not going to get it right, but it's something like Warren Buffett, the most the best investor of all times, the one of the richest men in the world. He says that in a bear market, when everything is falling apart in the stock exchange market, most people are crying in the corner, and he just takes that opportunity to do, to use the resources he has to buy when it's low. Most people are crying because it's dropped, and he's actually like, this is my time. If you can operate like that as a business owner, then the easy times are going to be amazing, but then you can do very well in the hard times as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Just being able to look at the opportunity, even when people are complaining, there is always opportunity. There is always a silver lining. There is always something that you can take a hold of and go, well, I can make lemonade out of those lemons. I can take this these changes that are happening and create some education around it. I can see that people are not getting their services met in this particular type of area. Maybe I can fill that need. But then just taking your abilities and your passions and going, right, well, what can I build out of these things? Because that's often where so much of the amazing things happen running a business, is going, I love doing this. People need this. Let's put those together. And if you can take out that whole idea of, well, does the government have to pay for it, or what are the other options there? So I think we've got a lot of options for people who are maybe in the NDIS and haven't run a business outside of the NDIS before, for them to look at and go, I could probably innovate here somewhere. I could innovate, I could diversify, I could add services, I could meet with people outside the NDIS. I mean, guys, we all network inside the NDIS, but are you meeting with business owners outside of the NDIS to experience what they're working with? Are you learning from their struggles and how they pivoted in different areas? So having these opportunities, they don't just come to you. You have to go and get them. So, it is always a great way to be able to understand the changes that are here. Awesome. They may be big, they may be small. How do I have them not affect me as much as possible? So fantastic, Tania. And thank you, absolutely, for sharing around those things that you've seen with providers and how they've pivoted. Those guys at Payless do some really, really cool stuff. I've seen that. What's up for us next week? Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Look, make sure you're here for the episode, guys. We'll get this out to you. We would love to be able to continue to support all of our listeners with the information that's going to solve some problems right now. But until next time, have a great week, and we'll see you later.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast with Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. We hope you found today's episode informative and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating, and share it with others who could benefit from our insights. Until next time, keep thriving.